Welcome to They Are Waiting for Us from Forbes Books, the podcast that explores how education can transform lives and communities, featuring conversations with change agents who are making a difference in education, from parents and advocates to teachers and leaders. Here's Dr. Lisa Andrew.
It is an honor to welcome Chancellor Juan Sánchez Muñoz to the podcast. With deep roots in the Central Valley, Chancellor Muñoz has risen from immigrant family fields to earn multiple degrees, including a PhD from UCLA. His distinguished career spans secondary and community college teaching, senior leadership at the University of Houston downtown, and now the chancellorship of UC Merced. Chancellor Muñoz advocates tirelessly for access, diversity, and excellence as a leader in prominent higher education organizations. His vision propels initiatives to increase opportunity. Chancellor Juan Sánchez Muñoz, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
So, from my experience, the cost of college is a major deterrent for families. Given your extensive experience at public universities in California and Texas, can you share how the two systems compare in terms of access and affordability for students?
Yeah, sure. Of course. This is a very important topic, and so often families have to really crunch the numbers to decide, not where their students will attend by virtue of their academic preparedness. They want to proceed to higher education. It's simply what they have the ability to sort of to manage financially.
Yeah.
I would say in my experience, having been in Texas for almost 20 years and grown up in Los Angeles, and I attended both the UC and the Cal State system. I have a master's degree from the Cal State system and 2 degrees from the UC. I would say that actually, I think the systems are quite comparable in terms of their cost. They're right just north of $10,000 for tuition. That's not total cost of living, right? So depending on where you live, the total cost of attendance, right, could be higher, for example, in a San Diego market, LA market, San Francisco, than in a Merced Riverside market. If you attend school in Austin, for example, that could be more expensive than if you attended school in Texarkana. Texas Tech, for example, is a tremendously affordable community. Housing is reasonable. Many Texas public universities and California public universities in Texas, most schools have some kind of promise grant. In Texas Tech, I think it was called the Red Raider Guarantee. And when it was first introduced, it was if your family's adjusted gross income was under $50,000, then they would guarantee free tuition.
Gotcha.
That was a combination of a Texas grant, Pell grant, and institutional grants. That's gone up to close to $80,000-$90,000.
Wow.
Many universities have that kind of program. In the UC, something like, I'm going to just round the numbers, something like 60% of students in the UC are fully financed, and something like 75%, 73% receive substantial financial aid. And certainly at a school like UC Merced, where we have, just about 58% Pell eligible students, you're receiving close to $10,000 Pell grant, Cal grant, institutional grant. That's going to cover your entire tuition for the most part, fully funded. The issue is the cost of living, right? Apartment, food, transportation, etc. And so I would say that both Texas and California do a very, very good job in helping very low income and middle income. It's really the middle upper income families, right, who maybe combined have $180,000, which sounds like a lot, $170,000, but 2 kids in college,
right,
2 cars, 2 insurances, and so we just have to do more and more and more. And certainly at UC Merced, we're doing everything we can. We have the highest percentage of first generation students at UC Merced and the UC, and the highest percentage of Pell eligible. I remember my father, for example, when I went to college at UC Santa Barbara, my father made about $13,000 a year, and there were 8 in our household.
Wow.
8. And so I would say Texas and California are quite considerate in supporting lower income families and middle income families. And what we have to do is also try to find resources for upper middle income families to avail themselves of higher education.
Great. So speaking of first gen, what advice do you have for first gen college students who want to pursue higher education?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Lisa. Thanks. And so there's probably not a day that goes by that I don't interact with some student who says that they're first generation. It's interesting. When I went to UC Santa Barbara in 1985, nobody asked us that. They didn't ask us that. I don't remember that vernacular, that nomenclature of first gen. Most of us that started were poor. We were poor. Our families were working class people. They were blue collar people, laborers. Many of our parents didn't have any formal education from Mexico. I would say, first of all, not everyone may agree with me, but I happen to believe that sort of the people that I know and both my age and younger who grew up in some adversity have been really seasoned and tested by that adversity, and they're ambitious. So growing up poor doesn't mean you want to end up poor. And most poor people that I know wanted to extricate themselves from that material circumstance and see higher education as the scaffolding to a better life for them and for their family. So I say to first generation students, nothing in higher education that you will face will likely be as challenging as what you have already faced.
Agreed.
So once you say, hold on, I've already overcome so much because of the circumstances of my family, and you're telling me, Chancellor, that nothing no laboratory, no homework assignment, no reading of Mice and Men is going to be harder than what I already succeeded at overcoming? I'm going to say yes. And they're going to say, well, then college is going to be a little bit kind of, easy.
Yeah.
And I say, in my experience, I have been so impressed more so by people with tenacity than always people with talent. Sometimes when you come up with, a little comfortable and have talent, you take things for granted. People that grow up a little gritty, a little bit scrappy, and have to work hard, they're amazingly successful in higher ed. So I would say to first generation students that don't be the last generation.
Excellent.
Be the first generation to inspire the others and show them how capable they are and how welcoming higher ed. And here's the other thing.
Good.
20 years ago, this wasn't the case, Lisa. You know this. But today, my provost, first gen. The chancellor, first gen. Department chairs, first gen. Robin DeLugan was the former chair of the faculty senate. First gen, native woman, who started in community college. Higher ed is filled with first generation leadership. And our responsibility is making sure that we're not the last generation.
Agreed. So both you and I are first gen, and both of us are now sitting in a leadership position. So I'm wanting to hear from you. I'm curious, how has your experience as a first generation college student influenced your approach to leadership?
Right. Well, first of all, here's one thing I learned about growing up in the circumstances that I did, that the brilliance is not automatically associated with academic degrees and income. Some of the most brilliant, dynamic, creative, amazing people I know never graduated from high school. So I deal with people based on what they present, not the presumption of what they represent. And so that I bring from my immigrant, blue-collar, working-class background. I respect and admire all people, period. The people that wear cufflinks and those who do not. My friend said recently, he said, Chancellor, you might have grown up in a household where your dad took a shower at the end of the day. He goes, but now you look like the kind of guy who takes a shower in the beginning of the day.
I've never heard that before. That's
right.
interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
Right? Because my father was a machinist and he showered at the end of the day.
Yes.
And so my point is that I bring that to the job, and I appreciate and admire people automatically.
Right.
And I don't really trade in pretenses or airs. It's not my nature. It's not my demeanor. And I also have a very working class, blue collar, Mexicano sort of work ethic. And somebody said to me recently, what's your protected time? And I go, is that an animal species? We work when we have to, and that's how I was raised. And so I hope that I bring an honesty, a sincerity because of that background that you and I share, and a sense. And then I'll just end this, and a deep sense of obligation. Education in this country changed the course of my life, my wife's life, our children's life. I feel a deep sense of, in Spanish you say obligación, a deep sense of obligation to contribute to the system that changed my life, and to prepare those who will replace me to have that same sense of obligation and service. This country has many problems, but the quality and the character of the people in it are mostly not the problem. And so these are some of the values and insights I bring to my position as a first generation student.
Love it. So I think you're a great transition into maybe one of our country's problems. I'm just going to put that there. So another deterrent can be admissions. Another deterrent to college could be admissions. And given the recent Supreme Court ruling about affirmative action, which effectively ends race-conscious admissions, what strategies have been most effective for boosting diversity at the universities that you've led?
Right. Well, certainly in California, for almost 25 years, since 2009, they've had to work with that prohibition. And the University of California, certainly has recovered essentially from pre-2009 numbers. That doesn't mean that it has had the 25, 30 years of growth, right?
Right.
But
been working on it though for a minute.
Right. So I think about the people, the civil rights leaders of the past, and all of the challenges and that they faced, and yet they found ways to address those restrictions, barriers, etc. We have to find new ways to achieve the goal of equitable, inclusive, representative education. We have to be more dynamic and maybe a bit disruptive in how we think about outreach, engagement, how we work with K-12 system, how we vertically align our educational apparatus, how we better prepare low-income students, how we look at inequity in terms of funding and also teacher preparation. Linda Darling-Hammond talks a lot about teacher attitude and how they come into the classroom, but a teacher of 5 years is very differently prepared than a teacher of 25 years. Where do we have the best teachers with the best experience and the most effective pedagogy? And how do we work with them and the communities that have higher percentages of diverse students and make sure that we're looking at how we're attracting them into higher ed and responding to some of the questions you said. I mean, recently I try to go to high schools. I speak to a lot of parents. I go directly to the high schools and I say, look, there's funding. They think, hey, financially it's inaccessible. They're unaware. Education, outreach, communication, multi-language, multiculturally. They're concerned about the application, the complicated. How do we simplify the application? How do we make it more accessible? So these are the sorts of things that we have to think about now. Even in the UC, it is the prohibition for race doesn't necessarily preclude the use of one's background. And when you say first generation immigrant parents, I mean, my mom and dad personally, right? My mom and dad had a combined education of 0 grades. They didn't go to school. And so talking about your background, if your family's background is Armenian, if your family's background is Latino, if your family's background is, etc., Native American, you're not precluded from describing how that circumstance informed your thinking and your preparation. But we have to think a little bit more dynamically. And here's one thing that higher education is remarkable at: coming up with solutions.
As it should be, because that's where we've got the most encouragement of thought. It's supposed to be that place where you have that encouragement of seeking, understanding, reflecting, trying things on and such. So if you had an audience with the Supreme Court, what advice would you give them about how to improve outcomes for underrepresented students?
Oh, that's fascinating. That's an interesting question. That's one I suppose I would ask to understand their mindset around what would represent equitable protection of opportunity. and then shape outreach and engagement and persistence and retention programs in a way that they felt was consistent with their interpretation. I suspect all of them believe in the power of higher education and in the power of all Americans having access. And so there probably isn't a great divide between what we want to accomplish and what they believe is valuable for our country. Senator Day O'Connor, in her deciding position, said, I might get the exact years wrong, but she said 20 or 25 years from now, we should not be having this conversation. And we are.
Exactly.
She was prescient. She was saying, hey, here's a couple of decades. You find a way to do this. So I would, it's an interesting point that she was making. And here we are, right? So I would say, how can we work together, better understand each other, and in a way so that 20, 25 years, we're not in exactly the same position.
Yeah. And to your point, just because we had the decision then and we have this decision now, all the talk needs to continue at a very high and engaging level so that we aren't in this, right? So that we don't go another 20, 25 years and we're still in the same place.
That's exactly right.
When something's up for a vote or something's up for a discussion, that's when we get most activated, and that's when we get most in this middle of how do we resolve or not, when the conversation should be just as activated and just as engaging right now. It's not like a reason to back. Maybe that's what she was saying. Like, hey, this is what it is right now, but don't stop talking. Don't stop talking. Don't stop advocating. Don't stop problem solving because you don't want to be right here.
You mentioned, I actually had the privilege of hearing her speak. You mentioned Texas Tech when I was there. She was invited to give a talk, and she was actually introduced by the late Senator John McCain. And her story was a remarkable one. Her story as a woman entering that industry, there was no doubt that she understood the importance of access and opportunity and representation. And so, again, to your point, right, where do we want to be 20 years from now? Because there's no doubt that the country will become even more diverse in terms of its citizenry 20 years from now. And what we want is everyone to feel as if they have equal protection, equal access, equal rights under the law to pursue higher education according to their wherewithal and desires.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I landed on the title of this podcast being They Are Waiting for Us is because I really think students from age 2 all the way to, doctoral students, they are really waiting for us in the system, part of the system, outside the system, to figure these things out, to continue the conversation about it, to be engaged in it. They're right here waiting for us to ask them their opinion, waiting for us to see what could be better for them. And we just have to have the will to stay engaged, the will to have that productive conflict so that we actually do move forward.
And speaking for the higher education apparatus in California, it really is the envy of many.
Yeah.
When you look at the structure of about 136 community colleges, you look at the 23, I believe, campus system of the CSU. You look at the 9 general academic institutions of the UC and the medical school at San Francisco, and then you look at the caliber of schools like Stanford, Caltech, USC, and many, many others, even private schools like Loyola and the University of San Diego. There is no surprise why so many from across the country and the world want to come to California. So what we have to do in California is there are a great many students who are academically qualified and eligible and admissible that are not continuing their education to one of these systems, community college, Cal State, UC, or privates. And the economy of the future is going to be so cerebrally based. Everybody is now, paying attention to AI. We've had machine learning for many, many years. And we forget these machines are imagined and created by people. So we need the right people coming out of mechanical engineering, computer science, medical education, biomedical engineering, et cetera, and become teachers. And we just have such a jewel in California in terms of our higher education apparatus that we need to do an even more effective job at bringing it to the awareness of our families.
Agreed. Okay, so to kind of wrap up this section on just higher education in general, besides being the chancellor of the most innovative and exciting UC in California, you serve on the board of prominent higher education organizations. So curious, what are the major issues that you're focused on in those roles?
Yeah, no, wonderful. So I serve on a few boards, including the American Council of Education, where ACE is well over 100 member institutions. I serve on the board of directors of people like Larry Buckow at Harvard and others. And so I would say that a few themes but also like Haku is another organization. Some themes that I think higher education leaders are mindful of is immediately recovering enrollment following COVID. You still have the residual sort of remnant effects of COVID on the fatigue, emotional, psychological, etc., on teachers and counselors and schools and families and students. So kind of fully purging that experience, number one. Number two, recovering students that have stopped out, right? A lot of students sort of disrupted their education. Here we call it retargeting, trying to contact them and finding out where they're at. So COVID still, the tail end of COVID, capturing students that have left. You know that there was a substantial decrease in community college students. In California, it was just over 2 million. Nationally, it was larger. Recontacting those students because community colleges are feeders to four-year schools, and that has impact for four-year schools across the country. And also, community college students are more diverse, right? So it has an issue for four-year campuses as well as the diversity of four-year campuses.
Right. Good point.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then of course issues of personnel, right? This whole hybrid work, remote, right, is going to be something that all industries are going to have to grapple with. What is the new nature of work, right? We're a very customer facing, student facing sort of apparatus entity. What does that look like in the future, right? What does hybrid instruction look like in the future? Is something that I think higher education leaders are talking about. And then maybe just finally, it's stunning for those of us in the work I do that there's discussions, conversations about the value of higher education. There are people who apparently feel like higher ed isn't for everyone. It's just interesting because all of them graduated from college and all of their children go to college. So I think, who's the everyone? Who are you talking about?
Right.
Right. And then, so this idea, I mean, look, there are things that you have a job and then you do special training. You know, we talk about badges, we talk about credentials, we talk about, and stacking experiences. So we're always upskilling in our jobs. But the idea that somehow the formal experience of dedicated academic disciplinary preparation, nobody says, I want the doctor who went to medical school from, reading it from a matchbook to operate on me. So continuing to reinforce the public confidence in higher education as being still leading edge, cutting edge. I'll just end with this, Lisa. I was at UC Santa Cruz on Monday as part of a committee called for the University of California on innovation and entrepreneurship, and a professor was presenting this work of how they're using virtual reality for people that have mobility issues to exercise a shoulder or an arm, right? And using technology in a medical application for people that don't have to drive to physical therapy. You can put their physical. It was just amazing the kinds of things that are happening in higher education, whether it's in the UC, Georgia Tech, Harvard, Princeton, Yale. I mean, higher ed makes life better. And so making sure, I think, that the public continues to be aware of that.
Right. And why can't it, what I'm always in rooms stating, I don't feel like it has to be an either or. Why can't we keep the doors to everything open all the time? You know, folks can go to tech. I mean, I went to technical training, then went to a junior college, then went to a four-year college.
Sure.
Right? Why? What I needed was to be sure that all those doors were open. Then I went and got my doctorate much later in life. The doors need to stay open throughout an individual's lifespan. We don't have to plug in and plug out or say, well, that's this is your route now, this is your, but showing how actually all these systems are connected together for a lifetime that you can go in and out of for your own economic mobility and your own desire, right? It's really then a system.
Well, Lisa, let me just jump on that point very quick. One of the largest groups of students entering higher ed are adult learners. They're one of the largest constituency group because I think this is going to happen to higher ed. We've got to think differently about on-ramps and off-ramps because the idea we focus on like the 18 to 21-year-old, I see a very different orchestration for higher ed in the future.
Yes, exactly. Well, okay, Chancellor, let's stop here. But coming up in the second part of my talk with Chancellor Juan Sánchez Muñoz from the University of California, Merced, the Chancellor explains why his school is a compelling choice for students seeking advanced education.
We're a very affordable campus in a very affordable community with very high graduation rates and very compelling majors for the future. And this is what we hope will attract students and their families.
This has been They Are Waiting for Us. If you want to learn how to create economic opportunity through equal access to quality education and create an extraordinary learning environment focused on everyone realizing their full potential, go to drlisaandrew.com. They Are Waiting for Us is a production of Forbes Books.